This is a real jump outside the comfort zone for me and also for my guest, esteemed NBA analyst Danny Leroux, who I have been listening to in a non KM Best capacity for more than a decade, co host of the Dunked On podcast at Real GM Radio, writes for The Athletic, a bunch of different places where you can get this like high end NBA analyst mind. Danny, tell them a little bit about yourself, your experience with card games such as they are, and if you expect to have any skills that overlap.
Skills that overlap, I think we're going to have to see. Like, that'll be interesting. I would say I'm more familiar with card games
Sure.
than experienced with them. So I have a couple friends that in various different capacities have done them, but it's not really an experience that I've shared with them too much. One of a friend once like had me play half a game of Magic to see, and
Nice.
then we got distracted by his kids or my kids or something. But so I would say I'm familiar with the constructs and the concepts, but I've never like played a full game myself. So this will be fun.
Okay, so this is like by far the least experienced person we've ever had on any of these shows like this. So I did come up with like hopefully some easier stuff. And, you know, lucky for you, Marvel Snap is the world's easiest card game to understand. That's like basically the selling point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through the rules so you can understand the basics here. I'm not going to get too complex. Please don't yell at me in the comments. Basic rules of Marvel Snap. You have a deck composed of 12 cards. You get to choose what those 12 cards are. There are various cards in the game. You can see the Hulk right over there. This is a card game that allows you to draw cards from your deck randomly. So you will randomly draw 3 cards before the game starts, and then 1 card every turn, starting on turn 1. Turns are simultaneous. You put something down, your opponents put something down, and then they are revealed at the same time. The goal of Marvel Snap is to win 2 out of 3 locations. These are the places where you can play cards. A location can have whatever effects there are, but there are going to be 3 locations in every game. You can play up to 4 cards on each location, and from there, the game is actually basically just counting. You can see the Hulk, that 12 up there, that means it counts for 12. You put it on a location, you have 12 points at that location. That's actually basically the game. Winning 2 out of 3 locations over the course of 6 turns, and then we'll also cover just a little bit of energy stuff, but I want to make sure you have the basics down before I get into a little bit more specific.
Okay, I think I got that part.
Okay, getting a little bit more specific, the 6 in the Hulk up there, that's how much he costs. He costs 6 energy, right? Yeah, that's what it takes to play him. So you have the Hulk there. There are only 6 turns in a game of Marvel Snap. Each turn you will have an amount of energy corresponding to what the turn is. So on turn 1 you have 1 energy. On turn 2 you have 2 energy, all the way up. Now you can see that there are problems with playing only one big guy on the final turn of the game because you have to win 2 out of 3 locations. So one big guy can win 1 location. What are you doing about the others? That is generally the way in which you'll have to think about this game. It's about winning 2 out of 3 locations by having the most points at 2 out of 3 locations, which means a lot of the time it's about effectively getting points for as little as possible, maximizing output, minimizing input.
And can you only play 1 card on a turn, maximum one play?
No, you have however much energy you have. So say it's turn 5, you got 5 energy, you can play a 2 and a 3.
Awesome.
Do you have any generalized questions about anything I just explained?
Let's see. Yeah, because I'm sure there'll be cards that do things like you neutralize or you enhance or you modify, but we'll get into that when I see something on
Yeah, absolutely. So the key things you're going to want to understand are the blue number, that's the cost, the orange number, that's the power, and then there'll be some text on most cards. You see Hulk smash down there. Most cards don't have flavor text. They actually do stuff. We're showing you Hulk because he doesn't do stuff. I'm going to run through the sort of baseline curve in the game so you can understand what like a generic 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 look like as well. Hulk being the generic 6.
Sure.
Here is your generic 1, Misty Knight, 2 power. You can see the ratios are a little bit like similar for now, but they'll get different the later they go. Ratio of inputting 1 energy to 2 power is sort of like the baseline minimal kind of thing you're going to want to keep in mind. Shocker, a 2-3. Cyclops, a 3-4. The Thing, a 4-6. Abomination at 5-9, and we already saw the Hulk. There is an implied thing here that I'm gonna make the opposite of implied, I guess, by saying it, which is you can't, since there are 3 locations and 4 spots to play stuff at every location, it's usually not going to be enough to just get good ratios of like, oh, I'm getting my 2-to-1 ratio. You're gonna also need to care about the amount of space you are using while getting that ratio, which is why it's sort of scaling up in this weird way that Abomination is 5-9, even though Misty Knight was 1-2. It's not meant to be linear. Misty Knight gets to have a better ratio because she is fundamentally smaller than a bunch of other stuff, which means that there is, later on, a bit of a punish for using a space on something that small.
Right, that makes sense.
Cool. And now it is time for me to disappear my face from Danny because I have the world's worst poker face. I know people have been asking about this. I do this in every video, but I don't mention it in every video. I'm mentioning it because people have been asking. My face is not going to be visible to him. He cannot see me. I am John Cena. I am, in fact, the bad guy. So, Danny, this is your first card. This is Wasp. 0-1, the secret 7th vanilla, but she does cost 0, so you can just do that whenever you want.
So I think that's a good card to have in your deck because of the 0 energy, but my instinct is you would actually probably want to play it a little bit later unless it has some sort of amplification because you wouldn't know where you need that like tiebreaker point.
Okay, so that is like, you're halfway there, which is that instinct about the second part of it is exactly correct. The value of cheap cards is in part that you can distribute them later where you know you need it. However, this is a card that falls victim to what we talked about earlier, where it's often just not even worth the use of the space on the board.
Because it's a 1.
Yes.
That makes sense.
It's the space on the board and the space in your deck. This is like a Vorp case, right? Where it's like, you can put this in your deck, but you might just have it instead of something that could actually matter. Like, imagine having this and you don't have like a card that costs 5 on turn 5, and you're just staring at this and you're just like, I guess I do nothing because I don't get to use my energy well this turn. So that is like the thing that Wasp falls victim to most often. You are also correct about amplification. She's often played with things where you are sort of explicitly using her to cheat, i.e., there's a card that like flips a card that you play on it into the deck for a random other card. She's great there. Like, that's what she does. That's her thing, is because she costs 0, she gets flipped into the deck, something else comes out, and then you've invested 0 for a return that is more than 1 point.
Oh, that's smart.
Next up is Cerebro. This is a 2-0, but it has an ability, and that ability is ongoing, which means it is just perpetual. This happens as long as this card is on the board. Your highest power cards get +2 power.
So my question is, it says cards plural. Is there like a, because that seems interesting because the 2-0, but I think this is probably actually a pretty valuable card because it makes your best cards better. And if it's a card, so it's one that if you have strong high cards, it could make you win a block, like one of those locations when you might not have otherwise.
Clarification here. Highest power cards, meaning like whatever the biggest number is, that gets +2. But like, let's say you build your deck such that you play only things that have 3. It will give all of them +2. So that's sort of how it works.
Oh, that's fun.
So it is fair, like, there are a lot of good cards in Marvel Snap. Cerebro has generally not been regarded as one of them. This is because of how finicky it is. Because you have to do that deck building work, right? And you're actually, again, like, this is what's weirding me out. You're again correct about a game dynamic, which is like, winning a location that your opponent doesn't think you can win is one of the most valuable things in the game. Like, having this full location, playing a Cerebro to make it stronger, that's really valuable. That actually is like the best thing you can do with this card. The card itself, a little bit actually weak. And I showed you this to sort of calibrate your expectations, where like, this card looks like it could be pretty strong. There are much stronger things to do than this card.
Sure, that makes sense.
This one might be a little bit complex. It is Sam Wilson, Captain America, from the recent movie, actually. Mm-hmm. A 2-3, so baseline 2-3 stats. And he has an ability that happens at the beginning of the game, which is, he puts Cap's shield on a random location, and his ongoing ability is that when he's on the board, you can move Cap's shield. I realize, of course, that I must show you Cap's shield, which is, it cannot be destroyed, and whenever it moves to Cap's location, Cap gets +2 power.
So he becomes, it was a 2/3, right? So then he becomes a 2/5 technically if the shield is there.
Actually, it's a little bit better than that. He becomes a 2/5 if you move it to him once, but then you can move it away, and then you can move it back again. You can only move once per turn, but he can get up to like 2/7.
Oh, so that seems, so then it's a card that you could play early and you can move, and if you, because it's simultaneous play, so you could move it. So that, I think it's probably, I'm guessing it's a good card, but not a great card. But I do think that can push the ratio, and the cost of it is relatively low. So that's, my instinct is good, not amazing. Am I right? I might not be.
I mean, I would give you the point for that personally, in as much as there are points in this. But I think when you like specifically called out not great, this guy is like basically the best card in the game. Like,
okay, interesting.
This is like one of the things that'll happen a lot in Marvel Snap, and like the analogy I'll draw here, I'll draw an NBA analogy. Like this guy's like, not necessarily, I would describe him as like, I don't know, the Warriors Klay Thompson of Marvel Snap, where it's like, yeah, okay, he's not necessarily going to be the thing that wins you every game. But having him there provides this baseline of consistent work that has this massive, overwhelming upside attached to it some of the time, right?
Yeah.
And so he is just like at baseline, there's a million valuable little things that he does. But like in specific, the thing he does the best is just be a 2-drop that is like twice as big as the average 2-drop. It's just a big number.
And so I would guess if you have this card, if you can, you pretty much play it on the second round every time.
That is the idea.
You give yourself the most opportunities to bring the shield back and all that type of stuff.
There's like a lot of, because like he works better the earlier you play him. A lot of scalers tend to do that. This is like a fairly well-worn archetype in card games, which is like the small guy that gets big later. But he manages to do that with like almost, like, I won't say no downside, but like extremely low downside. If your opponent is trying to clog you up, you can move stuff around. Having the ability to move is super valuable. This guy can't be destroyed, so you can just put it in locations where you would otherwise be unable to get to. And all of that comes in addition to the fact that, like, yeah, he's a 2/3. This is a free 4th point. So it's like baseline 2/4 scaling up to like 2/9.
Also, props to the designers for having a small guy who gets bigger be Captain America, considering the origins of that character. Like, that kind of works.
It is a sick, nasty move, because here's another props to the designers moment. The shield also works on the Steve Rogers Captain America. So you can throw the shield back and forth, and they both get bigger.
Oh, that's fun.
It's very sick.
Yeah, because it starts on a random location, but then you can move it controlled after that.
Right, so like you just put Sam on the location that the shield is not on, and then you get your trigger, Captain America, you get your trigger, etc., etc., etc. It's just a very lot amount of points.
Okay, so I have a clarification question on Nakia, I'm guessing it is. So gives all cards in your hand +1 power. Does that mean the cards you have not played or the cards that you have played?
It means the cards you have not played. Those are in your hand. Remember we talked about how you draw 3 cards at the beginning of the game and then 1 on each turn?
Okay.
This one is a card that's rewarding you for not playing them by saying, hey, they get stronger if you hold them.
Stronger if you hold them, but and with the sequencing events, that means that you could theoretically, if you play this at your 3, then you could have it for your 4, 5, and 6 plays. You can bump all those up.
Correct.
That's pretty good. The ratio on this is individual, but I'm guessing that the value on this card is the amplification of your high value, the hulks that you have.
Right. That is the correct way to look at it. However, the issue is that those are typically the cards that need less amplification. If Hulk is already 12, he doesn't really need to be 13,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the issue with this card then would probably be Vorp, or I guess Vork if we're talking cards, because you still have to use a turn to play it. And you get all these ones better, but it's only for 3 more turns.
Yes,
so it's only the 4, 5, and 6. and it doesn't do a lot on its own. So it's like it's the guy who, I'll draw a basketball analogy,
Shoot.
who can pass the ball but can't score for themselves. Like maybe it's that sort of thing.
Yeah, actually, like it's never going to be the centerpiece of a team. It's never going to be anything more than like, I'm trying to think of like a good example of this, like, you know, like not even like the sixth man off the bench kind of deal, but like
It's
run
like
the second unit.
TJ McConnell is the idea.
Sure. Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like, I was trying to think. 'Cause, like, I think she's a little worse than TJ McConnell, but I feel like I don't want to be rude. Like, that's sort of where I'm at. So she is a card that is absolutely never going to be the best card in the deck. Absolutely never going to be the fifth best card in the deck. Can synergize in certain ways with things that are good with buffs, but will only ever be played in those contexts at a high level.
Makes sense.
Galacta, a character I'm sure everyone knows exists. Everyone knows Galacta, the daughter of Galactus. It's incredibly famous. 4/6. Each turn, the first card you play at another location reveals with +3 power.
So it's a decent card in of itself. I mean, 4/6 isn't bad, but that means the first card you play at another location. So there are only 2 hands that you can use this. But that's a pretty potent thing. But you did talk about previously with the last card about how it's amplifying cards that are already probably pretty powerful depending on what you're already playing. But that's still like an extra +6.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think it's as good as the cap card, but I think good players could have this in their deck.
Yeah, you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. So this is like where the previous one was like, this is lacking some oomph, right? Can't score for himself. That was the example here. Galacta is just good enough on numbers that you do not care. This is a superstar who can pass and score. Like, this is a LeBron. This is like current LeBron, not like previous LeBron. Like, he's still really good, but like not, you know, we're not talking like MVP LeBron. This is like current LeBron. This is just one of the, I don't know, 10 best cards in the game, and on any given night you might just be like, wow, that card just completely beat me, like, entirely.
So does that mean that my statement that it's worse than cap, is that wrong?
No, that's right. Just cap's really good. Like, in this analogy, cap is Shea or Jokic, right? Like, okay. That's just like one of the 2 best cards in the game, period. Galacta is one of those who's like in contention for that spot, where it's like, she's really strong, obviously. And again, a lot of this is metagame contextual. We just actually entered a metagame where Captain America is much less relevant and good, but I consider that more a result of like an anomaly, no relation to Jason Tatum, that on the part of the developers, where they like made a decision that I think will be not necessarily indicative of long-term performance.
And so they can kind of like change rules like that as they go, if they've realized that something is overpowered or underpowered or whatever. That's interesting.
They patched the game more than any other card game I've ever played. Like, this is where I would normally make an NBA All-Star Game joke, but I'm not going to. Where this is like basically every 3 weeks they're like, is something messed up? Let's take a number off of it, you know? And so there is massive potential for everything I'm saying to change in the future.
That's fun.
It is a very dynamic system. All right, let's give you a hard one. Mr. Negative. 4, -1. On reveal ability, meaning when you play him and he flips up, swap the power and cost of all the cards in your deck.
So I think that you would have to have a specific strategy built around this card, but that there could potentially be one, because what it does is, because you get to control the cards that are in your deck. So this is a deck management tool. And so the thing that I think would be notable about this card is I feel like you would know if someone was playing this strategy even from the early going, but that you could build a deck, maybe not the highest level. Maybe this is more like you could get to like the 85th or 90th percentile deck with this idea. I would just have to know what cards are available, but I do think there's a way you can play it.
I am kind of in awe here. Like, Yeah. Yes, exactly. Like, yes, there is a Mr. Negative deck. It is rarely the absolute best thing to be doing. It is quite often very playable. It is also, and you nailed another thing that I don't think a lot of people get, which is like, you would be able to tell they're doing this because of the lack of other typical things that they're doing. Like, when you are doing something like a Mr. Negative deck, your early game is often very sparse because of what this card is asking you to do in deck building, which is play Mr. Negative as fast as possible, several question marks, win the game. And so then you have like, if you're, there are like a couple cards that are like signposts of this archetype, basically, where if like my opponent plays one of them on turn 2, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Mr. Negative deck before they have even played the Mr. Negative card. So like identifying that dynamic is that is really special, actually. Like that is just really good. Electro. On reveal, +1 max energy. Ongoing, you can only play 1 card a turn. So what this guy means, we talked about you have energy equal to the turn. Now you're going to have 1 more energy each turn.
Oh, so okay. So, but the 1 card per turn makes me think that it's actually kind of a late. That it's kind of a. But you could play your Hulk a turn earlier.
Correct.
Like that, the equivalent of that. So, again, I think this. So I think this is a card that you had that a lot of that people could have in their deck, but you don't necessarily always play. You might need to read the room a little bit. But I think I might be. I'm. What's interesting about this one for me, because I'm like, if I'm interpreting the stuff,
sure,
I can't. I'm sure I'm underselling it or overselling it, and I'm genuinely unsure which.
Okay. You're overselling it a little bit. This guy kind of sucks.
Okay.
Like it's not necessarily his fault per se. It's just that like there are other ways to cheat energy. We just saw Mr. Negative, right? Like that is effectively a method of energy cheating because you're just trying to get a bunch of free stuff, right? That's what Mr. Negative is trying to make happen. And so the methods of energy cheating are generally a little bit better than Electro. And that 1 card per turn thing that you talked about, remember how you said you'd like to save Wasp so you can make sure you know where she goes? A lot of the upside of having extra energy is having more options on the later turn of the game. Electro very explicitly takes away those options. And so he has to be built in that way that you mentioned, where it's like, here's a Hulk, here's a second Hulk. That's my game plan. And you just kind of got to hope that works.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Next up, Wolfsbane. A 3/1 with an on-reveal ability that gives it +2 power for each other card you have here. Here, in this case...
in that location?
Correct, meaning up to 3/9, or 3/8. What am I doing? Up to 3/7. I play this game. What am I doing?
So, I mean, it's kind of, it's cheap power, relatively. So the 3/1, but it basically, as you said, it works like a 3/7. But you have to, that means, but it's a card, it's a strength in numbers card, meaning you have to, I think you functionally have to commit to playing 4 cards, because it's maximum 4 cards in an area, right?
Correct. And also correct.
So that means you have to be doing a strength in numbers approach at that place, because otherwise there's no point in playing this card. But so I think that this is another one where it's like, it's deck management, where I think that you could probably do this idea that you wouldn't need this card enough unless you were running something very specific. But if you only have, I think you said it was 12. So you start with 3 and then you pick up 1 per turn.
Yeah, so you see 9 total.
My instinct is you don't use this a lot.
That's a correct instinct. And it's correct for 2 reasons. The first is, yes, she does require you to be a deck that commits 4 cards to a location. She's simply not worth playing if you're not getting max value out of her. The problem is, she's also not incredibly worth playing if you are getting max value out of her. She's a role player that there are better versions of. This is like, you can do this with her, but you are probably going to have a more profitable payoff to your I'm playing 75 cards everywhere strategy than just Wolfsbane. 3/7, it's cool, but it's not like you build your deck around it, you don't write home about it. At best, a role player, typically a role player that gets outperformed in her own niche some of the time.
Makes sense.
We are blasting through these. And like, I kind of want to just like, before we talk about Wiccan over here, ask you what you feel you've learned in the last 15 minutes. Like, because I feel like your answers are sort of leveling up a little bit. I kind of want to know what it is that has changed for you.
Well, I can tell you briefly, like I've done a lot of different fields. That what my specialty in all things is like learning how something works and then trying to break it down and reassemble it. Like
Sure.
that's how. So I used to do this in politics. I've done it in basketball. I've done it in other things. So like what I'm trying to do is like piece together how turns function, how the rounds function, that
Sure.
kind of thing. So that's kind of how I'm putting it together.
Okay, so with that in mind, this is Wiccan 4/6. On reveal, if you've spent all your energy on previous turns, +2 max energy.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So that means if you play this on your 4th turn, then your 5th and 6th turns become 7 and 8.
That is correct.
That's what this means.
That is what that means.
Okay. So I think there's that's interesting to me, because then you get, and you can add, so you're getting functionally it's a 4/6 in of itself. You could argue that it's a 4/10, but it also opens some doors. And again, this is, so what's interesting to me is the deck management part of this, because I think that I think it might in some way, like I think some people would actually probably use this card poorly. Like, oh, I could throw 1 or 2 things out there. But if you envision, well, okay, what can I do? Get into like the idea of work. Like, what can I do with that 6th and 7th energy and that 7th and 8th energy in those turns that I can't do with this card? And so what's interesting, because I'm going back to the Hulk part of it, is it would need to be, my instinct is it would be a volume play of like, instead of doing like a 6 and a 2, that you'd actually find some like bigger ROI, like 3s and 4s, and that you could then play multiples of that you might not have been able to before.
Okay, so a couple things here. We're going to start with something you said. You can argue it's a 4/10. You can't argue it's a 4/10. You can argue it's a 0/6 though, because you're getting that energy back.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I do think that like you're mostly there. There is a lot of like high ROI 2s, 3s, and 4s in this deck, in part because that's what you want to play in your Wiccan deck in the first place, right? Like you want to play a bunch of 2s, a bunch of 3s to make sure he actually does his thing. You do a lot of 6+2 though. I don't want to sit here and act like that doesn't happen. There is a lot of 6+2 in here. The reason that matters though is because of the Hulk thing, right? We talked about how it's a little bit awkward with both Hulk, with Electro, when you're just playing 1 card per turn and your goal is to win 2 out of 3 locations. Making it so you are just able to play any amount of additional power in addition to those 6s is really, really important. And that is sort of the crux of what this guy does a lot of the time. Is like,
that makes sense.
You get your big lane winning 6 and also put like 4 power somewhere else, and that actually just ends up really mattering.
Yeah, and I like your correction on that this changes the blue box, not the orange box. That makes sense.
That is correct. Here's a math card for you, which I really appreciate the design of this card, because she is sort of like explicitly like the nerd X-Man, and so they made her card feel like you have to do math to figure it out, which is just like really smart design work, honestly. On reveal, +2 power for each different power among all other cards here. Yes, I know.
So yeah, I mean, this is another one where I think you could, I think that you could different power, and so you could structure, because that, if you had the right stuff out there, you can really amplify a large number of things. This actually could be a card I'm thinking about. If you did this with the Wiccan, that would be interesting, because the idea that then you open up some more avenues for the later ones. So like, let's say you moved that round. So let's say you moved the 6. You moved the 5 to a 7. You played this in a 4. Something. Oh no, because Wiccan's a 4. So I think that I like the idea of this card. I'm really torn on whether it's more interesting than good, but because it's like, so it goes back to something you talked about before, where like I think you could build a deck around this card, but I don't know that you would want to.
She's a little interesting. So she's definitely not like a card necessarily for Wiccan decks, because what Wiccan wants is cards that are good before Wiccan and after Wiccan. And she's
That's right.
really bad before Wicked. What she is, though, is like my analogy for her, and you're probably the only person who really gets this analogy, you and like 5 people in my comments, she's late career Ray Allen. She is better in a high leverage situation. Like this is
Robert Ory.
Sure, yes. Where it's just like, this is a card that because one of the things that happens in Marvel Snap is when one of the easiest ways to win games in Marvel Snap is both of you are fighting over a location and you win it. When you win that high investment, high leverage location, that is a real game winning play because both of you have invested like 3 or 4 cards in there. And Sage gets better the more they invest. She is better in those high leverage situations because she scales off of their power too.
All other cards here includes the
Yes.
other. That makes sense. Oh, that's fun. Oh yeah, so that makes it even more powerful.
Yes, she is clutch. That is like her secret power. Her baseline power though is like when you get in those situations, when you get in those like 3 or 4 cards in a lane from either of you, she's like a 3/10 a lot of the time. And so when you're playing a deck that is like focused on winning 2 locations and ignoring the third, for example, she is an all-star, right? That's why I went for Ray Allen and not Big Shot Rob. Like I feel like it was like, you know, I gotta put a little bit of respect on Jesus Shuttlesworth. But like she's good, but she is sort of hyper specific. You do want her not generically, but in a specific strategy that is built to capitalize on her unique strengths.
Yeah, and it's the other thing that I like about Sage in this, which I think is different than a Mr. Negative, is that you wouldn't necessarily have a key that would be like, oh, that's what they're gonna do here. And so the idea that you could drop it late and that not being predictable, that there is utility in that, because otherwise you might see a person like be scared off of that location or maybe change something a little bit.
It's worth noting that she is actually typically played in Mr. Negative decks. Mr. Negative loves to see stuff that says 0 in the orange number because that's what he does. He makes that the cost, so you effectively get a free one. But she's like by far the least threatening thing that Mr. Negative makes cost 0. So like I don't even think it's like fair to dunk on you for that. Like it's just like if you see a Mr. Negative deck, you can expect Sage, but also it's like she is like your 5th problem once Mr. Negative has come down. Like you are already in a lot of trouble there.
So in a Mr. Negative deck, you would play Sage before Negative.
No. What Mr. Negative does is he flips the cards in your deck, right? So
what before or after? Okay, got it.
Yeah, so you only play after, right? Like so you play Mr. Negative on 4. If you draw Sage after playing Mr. Negative, she is a 0 cost card that has 3 power.
Oh, that's fun.
That's what he...
Okay,
yes.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Oh, that's fun.
The thing is, like, there's a bunch of, like, way stupider things to do. Like, for example, 0 cost cards that have 6 power, which used to be 6 cost cards, that are just, like, way stupider than Sage. So she's, like, a bit of a role player, even in the deck that makes her cost 0. We've talked about locations. This is the first time I'm going to tell you that locations do things. Each location that flips up in Marvel Snap has like a little line of text on it, and that impacts the game. And so that is important context for a card like Nocturne, which is you can move this card from location to location 1 time per game. When it moves, you replace the location it moved to with a random new one.
So basically, my instinct is that's like I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to mean it exactly this way, like kind of a flip the table, where it's like either something's not working for you or what you want to do is mess up the other person's strategy. So the idea is like they're building towards one thing and then you just go, and maybe they're doing a really good job of that. And then you just go, oh, well, that's not the thing anymore. Because it's a random new one. So you don't get to choose it. You don't get to do anything else like that. But the randomness, you can make the randomness work against the other person probably better than you can make it work for you.
It's the other way around, actually.
Interesting.
You make the randomness work for you because it's very unlikely for you to be able to be like, all right, I'm going to move this into the location that they've hyper invested in, and then they suddenly magically won't be winning the new location too, you know?
Okay.
It's much more about like, oh, that location totally screws me over. I'm getting rid of it. That said, she took a nerf. She used to be a 3/5. At 3/5, she was basically the best card in the game at the time. Before she got nerfed. I don't know if she would be now. She was extremely, extremely powerful for, frankly, many of the reasons Sam Wilson is currently extremely powerful. At 3-4, she's not that good. And in part, that is, I believe, intentional by the developers of the game, because when you play a card game, the reason you play a card game and not chess is the randomness of it. A worse player can beat a better player. That's never happening if I play Magnus Carlsen, but I can lose to God knows everyone I play. And so that is the fundamental appeal of a card game. The RNG has to go somewhere. And Marvel Snap has a lot less RNG than something like Magic the Gathering in it. There's a lot less randomness. So it's got to go somewhere. And where it goes in this game is on the locations, where they're just like, that's some text that completely changes the tenor of this game. And so the better a card like this is, the less RNG there is in the game, or the less it matters. The more you have cards like this being in every deck, the less people actually have to adapt to games and how they play out and have to change their strategy based on locations.
That makes sense. That's a really interesting kind of like how the game is played context.
When she's good, she is a flattener, basically. She makes it so the skill curve of the game gets like more straight. Like the better player wins more often.
Can you give me an example of not that I'm
Sure.
just interested in like
nuts.
what the one line of text for a location could be?
Yeah, sure. You can't play cards that cost more than 3 here.
Okay.
Yeah, just like stuff. Like stuff that's like it ranges from totally unimpactful, like every card here gets +1 power, to extremely impactful, like if you play a card here, it literally just dies. So
and that's just the context of the location, and so
yes,
that might be one that it changes and you know it as you start the game. So okay, that's
they
fine.
get revealed sequentially. You see the first one on turn 1, the second one on turn 2, the third one on turn 3.
Okay.
Rocket and Groot, another card that moves once and costs 3. After your opponent plays a card on the location this guy is at, steal 1 power from it. For the record, does matter for this guy. Moves happen before cards are revealed. So if you have this guy already face up and you're like, they're going to play here, and you can move him there to make sure he's stealing from the cards they play that turn.
Cool. So that definitely makes it more valuable because you can do it with that knowledge. It's still a 3/3 and you get, but it plays a card here, so that means you could, if you played it on turn 3, you could get that +1 for a couple of rounds, which is good.
Correct.
So, but it's getting, you can get an extra 1 power. So you could basically, it's sort of like, but okay, so steal 1 power means that it goes -1 and you go +1.
Correct. It is effectively 2.
So that pushes things up more. I'm still thinking it's not unbelievable. I'm thinking it's more in the very good range, but I'm not 100%.
No, you nailed it. This is a very good card. It is not unbelievable. It's not like, wow, oh my god, the greatest thing ever. It's just like, yeah, if you're missing a 3-drop in whatever deck you're playing and you're just doing something that requires some generically good cards, this guy's a great generically good card. It is also probably relevant to discuss just how important it can be to have a card that can move, because it's almost like idiot proof, where it's like, if you play something on turn 3 and then by like turn 6, you're like, I put that in the wrong location. I'm not even going to win that location. I'm never winning that location. Why did I invest that there? Being able to move that card out of there means that you're almost never blowing an investment early. And so that's
a great point.
That is what Rocket Raccoon and Groot can help you do.
Nice.
These are the fun guys. I kind of saved these for last on purpose because like it's hard to show you 6 drops until you understand the general context in which they exist. Because every 6-cost card, it's like the implied thing here is you're really only playing this. And there are plenty of ways to cheat that, but big guys. This is the Infinite. He has 20 power, but if you played a card last turn, you cannot play this card.
So you could argue that it's basically it's an 11/20, because you lose your 5.
If you're ballparking 5 based on Abomination there as a 5/9, is that what just happened? Did you just like take the 9 from Abomination off of this? Oh no, 11/20. Oh right, yeah. Sorry, I thought you said
6 plus 5.
I thought you said 6/11, not 11/20, and I was like, wow, that was really heads up.
No, I'm not that good. But so yeah, because you sacrifice a turn. Now the ratio is still really good there, but so like basically, so this is another one of them. So like I think you have to build your deck off of this idea because you lose your 5 round, and you lose your 5 round for like anything, for for all that. But 620. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this compares to the other sixes.
It is the biggest guy, like, if that's what you're wondering. Like, there's not like a guy out here who's like 625 without a downside.
But is there like a 618?
No.
Like that you don't lose the card next turn? So that because like that's so
You're right. I probably should have given you this one a little bit later, but I think you're like sort of on it, which is like you are very rarely building a deck to actually play this card. You are very often, when you're playing this card, building a deck to cheat him into play in some way other than actually casting him. This is not a card that you are like, yeah, let me put the Infinite in my deck. It's a card where you're like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I've got a card that says, pull a card out of my hand. I'm going to make sure it hits this. That's the kind of thing that this guy does.
That's a cool yeah. So that's a cool way to use this. It makes a lot of sense.
You're very rarely actually like, yeah, I'm just gonna skip my entire turn 5. It can happen. There have been decks built around that concept before. They've not ever really been good, but he's like just the premier. If you're gonna be like, I'm gonna discard and resurrect a guy, he's usually the guy.
Oh yeah, and so in like a discard resurrect, you can pick. You could. There are ways that you can finesse to make it more likely, or can you make it 100% likely that that's the one that flips out?
Yes, that is effectively the goal of any. My most hated deck in the game is a deck that is currently doing this. So there you go. That's pretty good. Magneto, 6/12 with an on reveal ability to move all enemy 3 and 4 cost cards to his location. Which I will clarify. There's a couple of mechanics things here. The first one is, it's not going to move stuff if there's no room at his location. It'll only move them as many as there's room, and it's random as to which it picks if there are too many to actually fit.
My instinct here is that this is one of the options that you have at 6, and it is a circumstance where you can ideally swing a different location to your favor by pulling, because it's in the last round, by pulling somebody else's where somebody else thought they had a strength and turning it into a weakness.
Yeah. This guy, I think I would say, is the most consistently good 6-drop in the entire game. He has been in the game since it released. He has always been good. Always.
But I'm guessing that he's not played every time. That it's a card that's good to have, but that you don't like. It's not always your 6-drop, but it's an often 6-drop. Does that make sense?
Yes. There are going to be plenty of situations where your strategy calls for something different. Magneto is typically played in like what I refer to as like good cards mid-range decks, where it's just like, my deck is a collection of the 12 best cards in the game. Like, can you beat the 12 best cards in the game? He is very often the top end of stuff like that. He is not as often seen in like specific synergy decks where you're like building around doing something specific based on the words on your cards. But the rate on him is just like, he's really big and has a cool disruptive effect and is very hard to play around.
I like it. I feel like that's a card I would play if I played this. It feels like the kind of chaos that I enjoy.
Yeah, no, he is a card. I think he's probably like the world's most unproblematic Marvel Snap card, where it's just like, I can't think of a single person that dislikes him. Everyone likes him. If you're playing, haha funny, you like him. If you like great stuff, you like him. He's just overwhelmingly likable.
Uncomplicated positive, just like how Magneto is in the other Marvel comics.
Extremely uncomplicated and only positive. Please do not read anything in the Krakoa series. Speaking of guys who were definitely right, Thanos is a wildly complex card who I normally save for like later in the video. It's normally like the last card I ask people about. It's not for you, because I think you'd actually, like, I just kind of want to see what you do here. At the game start, he starts in your opening hand, and he shuffles 6 Infinity Stones into your deck. And I'm going to show you what all of them are. Don't worry. The Space Stone has an on-reveal ability that draws a card, and an ongoing ability that lets Thanos get played or moved to whatever location you want. So, for example, we talked about a hypothetical location that says you can't play cards that cost more than 3 here. If you have Space Stone, you can play Thanos into that location.
Ooh. And it only costs 1.
Well, the Space Stone cost 1. Thanos still costs 6.
Yeah. So I said, yeah.
Yeah. Reality Stone is a replace this location with a new one. We saw this effect on Nocturne, just a simple 1/1 that replaces a location with a different location.
And it's randomized on that one too?
100%, yes.
Okay.
Time Stone gives Thanos -1 cost, taking him to 5, and draws a card. Mind Stone draws 2 of the other stones from your deck. Power Stone has an ongoing ability where if you've played all 6 stones, Thanos gains 10 power. And Soul Stone draws a card and has an ongoing ability that Thanos cannot be destroyed or discarded. Keep in mind, all of these cards get shuffled into your deck. Typical Marvel Snap deck, 12 cards. You play Thanos, you're starting with 18, although, because he starts in your opening hand, it is effectively a little bit easier on you.
So I feel like there's a lot of power here, and that power that you can harness and use. It will take a lot of turns to play the stones. There's a huge benefit to playing all of the stones. But what's interesting is there are a lot of, like, first of all, your idea before of how you could cheat the energy and try to get him out earlier and all that type of stuff. I feel like you already have the -1 trick in there, but I'm guessing there are probably even more to get him out earlier and to get the stones out earlier. I like this. My concern, it's funny because the big Thanos is like, I worry, like, it feels to my instinct on this is like that it's too powerful, which means that I'm probably thinking about it a little bit wrong.
So what would you say your answer is then?
I think it's very strong, but not the strongest.
Thanos has been at various times like the strongest guy ever. He is currently not that. But I think that it's almost a trap for me to show you this, because the difference between him being like the strongest guy ever and kind of sucking is like, it's hard to see on him. But typically, the thing that makes Thanos elite is that you play him in contexts that make his stones asymmetrically good. And so what I mean by that is that, like, there's a card that gets cheaper for every card that didn't start in your deck that you play. Those stones didn't start in your deck, so you're just making it cheaper for doing that. There's cards that buff your entire board. You have a lot of guys. This is a card that really cares about, like, having a lot of guys on the board. The stones are guys. And so, like, your job with Thanos is making him asymmetric, and typically how good he has been has depended entirely on how good the tools to make him asymmetric are.
I like that.
Dr. Doom, 6/5, on reveal, add a 5-power Doombot to each other location. I caught a little bit of a smile. Are you laughing at my background?
No, not entirely.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
So I like the idea. So it's funny. I know I'm not familiar with Doctor Doom much in the Marvel universe other than this yet. I mean, I at some point I want to be. Some of my friends do, but like, I like that you just add 5 to other locations like that. So that's a benefit for a late card that so because it's a single play unless you've added these other things that can go in.
Yeah.
But you're giving value even to the other spots, because he's actually, so you could argue that in some ways he's at 615, in some ways he's not. But I like the idea that you can spread it out. Like, I think this is another one. I brought this up with Magneto, that it's a 6 that you don't play every time. I could see this card being like that.
Yeah, it is exactly like that. That's what I was going to say, is like, this guy along with Magneto those are the cards, right? Where it's just like, you're looking for a good guy, just a strong finisher for whatever pile of crap you have. You got them. Like, these are the guys. Dr. Doom and Magneto have been doing the, like, handshake from Predator at the top of every mid-range deck's curve for 3 years. Like, they've just been doing this. That's what they do.
Nice.
Ultron, 6/8, on reveal, deploy 4 2-power drones to each other location. But, clarification, if you have stuff there, it will not put an additional 4. It'll just sort of fill up every other location with drones.
Yeah, so my instinct is that this is actually like less useful than Doctor Doom because the idea of a single 5 versus 4 2s, like you, and because if it's you 4 2s, that's 8 probably isn't enough to win most locations unless there's like a specific, like you were talking about that more than a 3 in a spot, like maybe something like that. Um, and so those are 0 costs. So my instinct is this isn't amazing.
Correct. Both in terms of relative to Doctor Doom and in general. This is typically worse than Doctor Doom because I think one of the things that you've grasped onto really quickly and really correctly is sort of the economy of space at each location. Where it's like, look, if I'm playing this Marvel Snap game, I'm probably going to have like 2 dudes at every location already. This guy's going to give me less than a Doctor Doom for the same input.
Good.
Eliath 6-9 on reveal. Remove the text from all unrevealed enemy characters here. Now, the reason I'm clarifying this is because this hasn't mattered up until now, but this is where we get into like an actual game mechanic thing. Like this is like the kind of spot where we can very easily get bogged down in jargon. Remember how I said turns are simultaneous? The order in which you flip up is determined by who is winning the game. So when you're winning the game, if you flip this guy up, he will remove the text from everything your opponent played at that location.
Interesting. So let's say in a Doctor Doom hypothetical,
yes,
you wouldn't get the Doom bots, you would just get Doctor Doom.
If you put it in the location Doctor Doom was in and you were winning the game, yes. If either of those things were not true.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so the here is that location.
Yep.
So I think that this card, it's an instinct thing on first of all, you have to be playing in the right sequence because it's only in this, it's a 6. So I guess you could theoretically, if you had one of the other tricks to play it earlier, you could potentially do something. But really, I think this is a circumstance where you think you know what the other person is playing, you play first, and you can take away the strength. So I think but a 6-9 is a relatively decent card in and of itself. It's not the best, but it's relatively decent. But I think the biggest utility of it is taking away something from the other side.
Exactly correct. That is what this card does. It's typically played in here's the thing. It is actually typically played in decks that cheat energy a lot, but it's not so you can play it earlier. It's just like you want to stop your opponent from doing whatever it is that swings the game back in their favor. Like whatever it is that they think is going to win them the game, this card is like, it is not going to do that. That is what its role is.
It's specifically a play from a head card in all different capacities. It's to maintain the status quo because you're winning.
Yes, that is exactly the role. All right, this is your last card. I usually it's either Thanos or this guy. Meet Galactus on reveal. If you're winning this location and this is your only card here, destroy all other locations.
So instead of it being win 2 out of 3, you just win?
You got to win this one, yeah.
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 Ooh, that's fun. I mean, so if you're winning this location, and this is your only card here. So you have to be winning it with a 6 and maybe some tricks. But it's your only card here. You don't even get that many tricks. I find it hard to believe that you would win that location with just that, because it's only this card because that would mean you couldn't have I know they're not the same deck, like the equivalent of a Thanos stone that counts as a card, right?
That does count as a card, yes.
So basically then, so now I'm piecing this more together. The way you would have this, so it'd be another card that we would have in your deck but you wouldn't necessarily use, is if an opponent is ignoring a location. Maybe they're scared of it, maybe they're doing something else. So if you get to the last turn and somebody's just ignoring one spot, and you just go, now you can't do anything, game's over.
Yeah, I mean, he's not very good. That is what you do with him, mostly.
Is he like the Sex Panther of cards?
No, because he does not work 60% of the time. He's like the reverse Sex Panther of cards.
Yeah.
40% of the time it works.
Or I was going to say 10%.
Yeah, he's typically it's also like pretty telegraphed because like it's like, okay, you've identified the problems here. So what does it look like when you're trying to win a location without having any cards there? It looks like you're putting crap on your opponent's side of that location, that you're allowed to do that. It looks like you're playing cards that could buff this guy, stuff like that. Like we saw Galacta earlier, so like Galacta into Galactus would work.
Could you do well? And then the other thing I was thinking of is you could play cards that move in an area, and then you just move them all off.
You could do that, yes. You would be able
so like
to
if you had like Rocket and Groot was one that we had that could move. So you have a couple there, and then you try to just mechanically because I'm interested in this.
Sure.
Can you move so let's say this is your strategy. Can you move those players like the other ones away on that turn, or would you have to telegraph that?
No, you can do that. Moves all happen before reveals, so he would not see any cards there. That would be, for the record, though, like probably pretty ass because it's not like your opponent is going to magically not contest that, assuming that you're going to move it. Because what if you don't move the cards? They're still going to be like playing cards there, and he's probably not going to be able to win it with his massive 6 power.
Exactly.
I do have one more thing. I was specifically requested to ask you to rate this pass. Honestly, I'm probably going to leave it all in there. I think this makes it funnier.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That is fine. I am fine with things that reveal my own incompetence because there's a lot of it. Good lord, this is horrifying me that I'm this bad at what I'm trying. Oh, of course.
Yeah, no. I mean, what else was it going to be? I was instructed by the man who set this up, who I'm not gonna mention any names because I don't know how comfortable he is with that. I was instructed to ask you to rate this pass.
2 out of 10.
Solid.
I mean, Nate. So Nate threw this one to me, so it was probably better than the ones I threw to him. Out in the beautiful park in Walnut Creek where that was shot.
Can I just ask, like, what was the premise? Like, did they pitch you on like wear a polo and throw a basketball around, or was it just like how did it happen?
So we did an article. There was an article written about us for Bloomberg.
Yeah.
I think that was in like 2018, and they sent out a photographer, and they basically said, "Where is there a basketball court nearby? Can you do basketball things?" And that was how that happened. But it became, because they're a photographer, they did a nice job.
Yeah.
Was, can you do basketball things in a place where the lighting is this and all that? And there were points where like, well, that doesn't make much sense, and they're like, we don't care.
It does actually look gorgeous out there. Like, if you get past the premise of the photo being extremely silly, it's a gorgeous day and it's a really good photo. Like,
I will tell you that I also, so my podcast partner, Nate Duncan, who is in this shot, because that's who the article was written, I have a version of this screen printed that I gave to him and is hopefully hanging in his house.
That's phenomenal. I was also sent a separate picture of you. It's like, the guy who set this up is like a close friend of yours. And the first thing he did was be like, okay, so if you get Danny on here, ask him to rate this pass. You don't necessarily have to put it on the video, but make sure you ask him to do this. And then he just sent me like a series of embarrassing photos of you. And was like, bring this up. Bring this up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So just
like
that. Yeah. Just like there's one of you with a glass of milk where it's just like, yeah, no, that's exactly what I should bring up on the context of this.
Oh, I mean, I could explain that if you wanted to, but only if you want to.
I don't want to put you through the ringer here. Like, this is not. I am not Bill Simmons. I am.
No.
I'm really happy with myself for that joke, actually. Like,
it was a good one.
I think that was pretty solid. Thank you so much for doing this, Danny Leroux. Would you say you have? What is it like? The way in which you approach this was fascinating to me. And one of the things that has really truly fascinated me as I've done more of these videos is the ways in which certain analytic skills overlap fields. And what is it that you would say? You talked about taking things apart and putting them back together. In what ways did you gain a greater understanding of this game over the course of that hour using that skill?
I think it's the use of space. So you have 4 spots for each location, how do you best use those spaces? Because like the idea, at first I was really focused on energy, but then like, and I know there's a lot more context to this that I don't have, which is fine, is that you can cheat energy, but you can't really cheat the number of spaces. And so you have to figure out how to use those well. And then you brought up the idea of characters that can move. I think that especially low cost or just have the capability there of the things that aren't fixed versus the things that are, and how in a game that even if it's 6 turns, that you can being able to adapt the value in adaptation, especially if things aren't going well for you.
There are people who've been playing this game for a year that, like, the way in which you phrased it of you can cheat energy, but you can't cheat board space is something that I know people in the comments are going to be like, oh my God, it finally all makes sense. Like, there are going to be people that have been playing this game for an extended period of time that you will have crystallized that thought for. And that is incredibly impressive after an hour and my very questionable explanations.
Well, apparently they've been good enough for me.
Apparently. Thank you so much, Danny Leroux. Tell everyone where they can find you. I have zero idea if this will do you any good whatsoever, because I am a gaming channel and you are one of the best basketball analysts on the internet. So we'll see if there's any overlap.
Well, first of all, thank you for that. So where you can find my stuff. So the main thing I do is the Dunked on Basketball podcast. We do typically 2 episodes a week that are public, and then we do the rest that is for subscribers. We also have a wonderful Discord, great community. Some people say it's the most positive basketball community that exists. I think that is really nice. And so you could do that. Nate and I also do what's called the NBA strategy stream. So you have to be really into the NBA for this. If you have NBA League Pass, you can basically, for a certain number of games, you can listen to us instead of listening to the broadcasters who are broadcasting it. We try to go more X's and O's and analytics, all that type of stuff. And then my written work is typically at The Athletic. That focuses more on the salary cap, collective bargaining agreement stuff. For the league, I do some specific team stuff. I do some for the league, and that's pretty much it for right now.
I strongly encourage everyone to check him out. Like, when I say that, like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Danny Leroux was one of my greatest influences as a broadcaster, but as someone who worked a bunch of very bad jobs where I had a lot of time while putting stuff together, the 4-hour NBA mock-off season podcasts have saved my life on multiple occasions. I told you in the emails thing that it was the 2016 one. It wasn't the 2016 one. It was the 2015 one. I was working at like a fitness place putting together an incredibly complex machine, and it was this offseason where Mike Conley was briefly the highest paid player in the league. And that is the one I remember extremely vividly. So when I say that, like, this comes with my highest recommendation, if you guys are into basketball, I mean that. This is secretly a huge deal for me. And so, like, please don't make me look stupid, okay? Thank you so much for watching. I've been KM Best. He's been Danny Leroux. And I will see you in the next one.